Growing up in suburban Ohio, I always knew where I stood in my family. Sarah was the golden child, and I was just Emma. While Sarah got the lead in school plays, I got participation ribbons. While Sarah received a brand new car for her 16th birthday, I got Sarah's hand-me-down bicycle with a wobbly wheel that never quite got fixed. Mom's eyes would light up whenever Sarah walked into a room, the same way other people's faces brightened when they saw a sunset or heard their favorite song. When Sarah spoke, Mom hung on every word like it was poetry. When I spoke, Mom would nod absently, already thinking about something else. "Emma, why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unofficial family motto. Sarah was prettier, smarter, more athletic, more charming. Sarah was everything I wasn't, and everything Mom wanted. For 23 years, I carried this weight. For 23 years, I believed I was the disappointing daughter, the afterthought, the mistake. I learned to make myself small, to need less, to expect nothing. I became an expert at swallowing hurt and calling it acceptance. But sometimes, the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you've buried it. After college, I moved to Portland, Oregon. 3,000 miles felt like the right distance between me and the constant reminder of my inadequacy. I found work as a graphic designer, made friends who didn't know I had a perfect sister to be compared to, and slowly began to build a life that felt like my own. Sarah stayed in Ohio, close to Mom, close to the life that had always centered around her. She became a teacher, got engaged to her high school sweetheart, and continued to be everything Mom had ever dreamed of in a daughter. From my distant vantage point, their relationship looked like something from a greeting card, all Sunday dinners and shopping trips and easy laughter. I visited twice a year, Christmas and Mom's birthday, fulfilling my obligation as a daughter while trying not to think too hard about how it felt to be a stranger in my childhood home. During these visits, I watched Mom and Sarah together, their easy intimacy a language I had never learned to speak. "Emma's doing well in Portland," Mom would say to relatives, like my success was a surprise that needed to be announced. "She's quite artistic, you know." The words always felt like consolation prizes, acknowledgments that I existed but wasn't quite worth celebrating. Sarah, for her part, seemed oblivious to the dynamic. She was warm and loving in her way, but there was an unconscious assumption in how she moved through the world, that she belonged at the center of things, that attention and affection were simply her due. She wasn't cruel, she just lived in a reality where she had always been chosen first. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March. Mom's voice was different, smaller somehow, uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. "Emma, honey, I need to talk to you about something." My first thought was cancer. My second thought was Dad. My third thought was that Sarah was pregnant and Mom wanted to make sure I heard it from family first, not from a Facebook post. "What is it, Mom?" There was a long pause, the kind of silence that stretches and fills with meaning. "I found some letters," she said finally. "Old letters. From your father." This confused me. Dad had been gone for 15 years, lost to a heart attack when I was 18 and Sarah was 20. He'd never been much of a letter writer, preferring phone calls and face-to-face conversations. What kind of letters? Another pause. Letters he never sent. I found them in his desk when I was finally cleaning out the basement. "Emma, there are things I never knew. Things about how he felt about our family, about how we treated you." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "What do you mean? Can you come home?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Please. I need to show you these letters. We need to talk." I flew home the next weekend, my stomach churning with anxiety and a hope I was afraid to name. Mom met me at the airport, and for the first time in my memory, her attention was entirely focused on me. Not because Sarah wasn't there to draw it away, but because she was really seeing me, maybe for the first time. The letters were in a shoebox on the kitchen table, Dad's familiar handwriting covering page after page of yellow legal paper. Mom's hands shook as she handed me the first one. "Dear Emma," it began. "Today is your 8th birthday, and I watched your mother give Sarah the bigger piece of cake at your own party. I wanted to say something, but I've become a coward in my own house. I'm writing this letter instead, knowing I'll never send it, knowing you'll never read these words. I see how hard you try, sweetheart. I see how you make yourself smaller so Sarah can shine brighter. I see how you've learned not to ask for things because you've learned not to expect them. It breaks my heart every single day. I looked up at Mom, who was crying silently. Keep reading, she whispered. Letter after letter revealed the truth I had never known, that Dad had seen everything. He had seen the favoritism, the way Mom unconsciously prioritized Sarah's needs and dreams over mine. He had seen how I adapted by becoming invisible, how I learned to find worth in asking for nothing. Your mother doesn't see what she's doing, one letter read. She loves you both, but she loves Sarah the way she always wished she had been loved, freely, openly, without condition. She loves you the way she learned to love herself, carefully, with reservations, with the belief that love must be earned. I should have intervened more. I should have fought for you harder. Instead, I enabled this dynamic by staying quiet, by thinking that keeping peace was more important than protecting you. I failed you, Emma, and I'm sorry. The letters painted a picture I had never seen, of a father who understood but felt powerless to change things, of a mother who was unconsciously recreating the conditional love she had grown up with, of a family system that had been broken long before I was born. Your grandmother was very critical of me, Mom said, her voice hollow. Nothing I did was ever good enough. I promised myself I would be different with my daughters, but I think I just passed it on in a different way. She explained how Sarah had been born during a difficult time in their marriage, how her easy temperament and quick smiles had felt like a gift during a period when everything else was falling apart. How I had come along 3 years later during a more stable time, but by then the patterns were set. Sarah was the child who had brought light during darkness. I was the child who had arrived when things were already bright. I made Sarah my emotional support before she was old enough to understand what that meant, Mom continued. And I made you. I made you responsible for not needing too much, for being easy, for not adding to my stress. That wasn't fair. That was never fair. The letters revealed more, how Dad had wanted to take me on special trips, just the two of us, but Mom had always found reasons why Sarah should come too. How he had argued for letting me quit piano lessons when it was clear I hated them, but Mom had insisted I stick with it because Sarah was so musical. How he had celebrated my small victories in private because he knew they would be overshadowed in public. I love watching you draw, one letter said. You have this expression of complete concentration, like you're channeling something beautiful from inside yourself onto the paper. I see the artist you're becoming, Emma. I see how unique and wonderful you are, and I'm sorry that this house doesn't always feel like a place where that uniqueness is celebrated. When Sarah arrived that evening, the letters were still spread across the kitchen table. Mom had called her too, explained what she had found. Sarah's first reaction was confusion, then hurt, then something that looked like guilt. I never knew Dad felt this way, she said, picking up one of the letters with trembling hands. I never realized. It was strange, watching Sarah confront the reality that her golden childhood had cast shadows on someone else. She had lived her entire life believing that the love and attention she received were simply the natural order of things, not understanding that love in our family had been a finite resource that had been unevenly distributed. I always thought Emma just preferred to be more independent, Sarah said, looking at me with new eyes. I thought she didn't want to do the things Mom and I did together. The conversation that followed was painful and necessary. We talked about birthday parties where I had been overlooked, Christmas mornings where Sarah's pile of presents had dwarfed mine, family dinners where my stories had been interrupted but Sarah's had been savored. We talked about how I had learned to celebrate my achievements alone because sharing them felt like asking for something that wouldn't be freely given. Sarah cried as she realized how many moments she had unconsciously dominated, how many times she had accepted preferential treatment without question. I thought that's just how families worked, she said. I thought that's how much attention everyone got. The letters were a revelation, but they weren't a magic cure. Learning the truth behind years of family dynamics was only the beginning of a much longer process of healing and rebuilding. Mom started therapy, working through her own childhood experiences with conditional love and learning how to offer something different. She began reaching out to me more intentionally, asking about my life not as a polite obligation but with genuine curiosity. She started remembering my birthday without Sarah having to remind her, sending care packages to Portland filled with things she had actually listened to me mention wanting. Sarah and I started having regular phone calls, just the two of us. She was learning how to step back sometimes, how to make space for other people to shine. I was learning how to speak up, how to take up space, how to believe that my voice mattered too. It wasn't always easy. Decades of ingrained patterns don't change overnight. Sometimes Mom would slip back into old habits, getting more excited about Sarah's promotion than my gallery showing. Sometimes I would retreat into old patterns too, making myself small and undemanding when what I really needed was to express my needs clearly. But there was intention now, awareness. When these moments happened, we could name them, address them, course correct. The letters had given us a vocabulary for discussing something that had always existed but had never been acknowledged. Reading Dad's letters changed my understanding of him too. I had always seen him as a passive figure in our family, someone who went along with Mom's decisions and never really advocated for me. The letters revealed a man who had been deeply conflicted, torn between keeping peace and protecting his daughter. I watch you at your art easel, one letter read, and I see myself at your age, when I wanted to be a painter before life convinced me to be practical instead. You have a gift, Emma, and I hope you never let anyone tell you it's not important enough to pursue. This explains so much, why he had always seemed to understand my creative impulses even when Mom dismissed them as impractical hobbies. Why he had bought me expensive art supplies for Christmas even when Mom complained about the cost. Why he had spent so many Saturday afternoons just sitting with me while I drew, not talking much but being present in a way that felt like support. The letters revealed that his apparent passivity had been its own form of protest. Unable to directly challenge Mom's favoritism, he had tried to love me in the margins, with quiet encouragement, private validation, and the promise that someone saw and valued who I really was. I know I'm failing you by not speaking up more, one of his last letters said. But I want you to know that you are seen, Emma. You are valued. You are enough, exactly as you are. I hope someday you'll know that, even if I'm not brave enough to tell you while I'm alive. As our family began to heal, the changes rippled outward into other relationships. I found myself more willing to advocate for myself at work, to pursue the creative projects that mattered to me, to expect better treatment from romantic partners. Learning that I deserved love and attention in my family of origin helped me demand it in other relationships too. Sarah, meanwhile, was learning how to form relationships where she wasn't automatically the center of attention. Her engagement to her high school sweetheart ended, not because she stopped loving him, but because she realized their relationship had been built on the same dynamic that had defined our family, with her needs and wants taking precedence over his. I was looking for someone who would treat me the way Mom always did, she explained to me during one of our phone calls. Someone who would put me first automatically, without me having to ask or reciprocate. That's not really love, that's just continuing the pattern. Mom was learning too, discovering parts of herself that had been buried under years of conditional love and the pressure to be perfect. She started taking art classes, something she had always wanted to do but had never given herself permission to pursue. She began reaching out to old friends, rebuilding relationships that had been neglected during the years when her emotional energy had been so focused on managing our family dynamics. The Christmas after the letters were discovered was different. For the first time in my adult life, I actually wanted to come home for the holidays. The house felt different too, less like a shrine to Sarah's accomplishments and more like a place where multiple people lived and mattered. Mom had asked me what traditions I wanted to establish, what would make the holidays feel meaningful for me. We started a new tradition of making art together on Christmas Eve, all three of us working on different projects in the same room. Sarah painted watercolors while I sketched and Mom worked on a collage. It wasn't something any of us had done before, but it felt like a tradition that belonged to all of us equally. We also started reading one of Dad's letters each night during my visit, talking about what he had observed and how we could honor his memory by doing better. It was painful sometimes, but it was also healing. We were finally having the conversations he had wanted to have while he was alive. Sarah and I exchanged different kinds of gifts that year too. Instead of the generic presents we had always given each other, we put thought into finding things that showed we actually knew and understood each other. Sarah gave me a set of professional-grade drawing pencils and a book about artists who had worked through family trauma. I gave her a journal and a book about healthy relationship dynamics, acknowledging her own journey of growth and self-discovery. On my last night of that Christmas visit, Mom knocked on my bedroom door. She was holding an envelope with my name written on it in her handwriting. "I wrote you a letter," she said simply. "The kind your father wrote but never sent. Except I'm sending this one." I opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Emma, I owe you an apology that's 23 years overdue. I failed you as a mother, not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't know how to love you the way you needed to be loved. I made Sarah my emotional support system before she was old enough to consent to that role, and I made you the easy child who didn't need as much attention. I convinced myself that this was just how families worked, that some children naturally needed more and others naturally needed less. I was wrong. You needed to be celebrated. You needed to have your achievements acknowledged with the same enthusiasm I showed for Sarah's. You needed to feel special and chosen and prioritized. You needed to know that your dreams mattered, that your voice mattered, that you mattered. I can't go back and give you the childhood you deserved, but I can promise you that I see you now. I see your talent, your strength, your beautiful heart. I see how you learned to find worth in asking for nothing, and I'm so sorry that was a lesson you had to learn. I'm proud of the woman you've become, Emma. I'm proud of how you've built a life for yourself despite feeling unsupported at home. I'm proud of your art, your independence, your willingness to forgive us even when we didn't deserve it. I love you, sweetheart. I've always loved you. I just didn't always know how to show it in a way that felt like love to you. I'm learning now. I hope it's not too late. Love, Mom." I cried reading that letter in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child. It was the apology I had never allowed myself to hope for, the acknowledgement I had stopped believing would ever come. It's been 2 years since Mom found Dad's letters, and our family is still a work in progress. We stumble sometimes, fall back into old patterns, hurt each other in ways we're still learning to recognize and address. But there's a foundation now that wasn't there before, a commitment to seeing each other clearly, to loving each other intentionally, to breaking the cycles that had defined our family for generations. I moved back to Ohio last spring, not because I felt obligated to, but because I wanted to be closer to this new version of our family that we're building together. I kept my apartment in Portland as a backup plan, a safety net that gives me the confidence to engage more fully without fear of being trapped in old dynamics. Sarah and I have become actual friends, not just sisters who tolerate each other. We have inside jokes now, shared interests, real conversations about things that matter to us. She's dating someone new, a man who seems to genuinely value her input while also expecting his own needs to be met. She's learning what healthy reciprocity looks like in relationships. Mom and I talk on the phone twice a week now, real conversations where she asks about my work and remembers the details of my life. She came to visit me in Portland before I moved back, the first time she had ever traveled somewhere just to see me. We spent 3 days exploring art galleries and coffee shops, and for the first time in my life, I had my mother's undivided attention. The letters from Dad continue to guide us. We found more as we cleaned out other areas of the house, letters about specific incidents we all remembered differently, observations about our family dynamics that helped us understand patterns we had never been able to name. Reading them is like having him participate in our healing process, like he's finally able to advocate for me in the way he had always wanted to. Sometimes people ask me if I'm angry about the years that were lost, the childhood that could have been different if these truths had been acknowledged sooner. The answer is complicated. Of course I grieve for the little girl who learned to make herself small, who grew up believing that love was something other people deserved more than she did. But I'm also grateful for the truth, whenever it came. I'm grateful that my father saw me, even if he couldn't find a way to show it while he was alive. I'm grateful that my mother was brave enough to confront her own patterns and do the hard work of change. I'm grateful that Sarah was willing to examine her own privilege and learn how to love more thoughtfully. The truth is a gift, even when it comes wrapped in pain. Learning that I was loved differently, not loved less, changed everything about how I see myself and how I move through the world. Understanding the family patterns that shaped us gave us the power to choose different patterns moving forward. I think about Dad's letters sometimes, about all the things he wanted to say but couldn't find a way to express. I think about how many families carry these unspoken truths, these hidden dynamics that shape who we become without us even realizing it. The story I grew up believing about myself, that I was the disappointing daughter, the afterthought, the one who didn't deserve as much, wasn't true. It was just the only story I had access to at the time. Having access to the full story, to the complexity and nuance and love that was always there but hidden, changed everything. Some wounds can only heal when they're first fully acknowledged. Some love can only be felt when it's expressed in a language the recipient can understand. Some families can only become healthy when they're willing to examine the ways they've been unhealthy. We're not a perfect family now. We're just a family that's learning how to love each other better, how to see each other more clearly, how to break the patterns that once broke us. And sometimes, that's the most beautiful kind of love story there is, not the kind where everything was always perfect, but the kind where people chose to do the hard work of making things better. Dad was right about one thing in those letters: I was enough, exactly as I was. I just needed the people who loved me to learn how to show me that truth in a way I could feel. Now they have, and everything is different. Not perfect, but different. Not without pain, but with purpose. And that makes all the difference in the world.